I'd like to call the January 25th, 2023 meeting of the Ogden Town Board to order. Please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd ask that you just remain standing for a moment of silent reflection and prayer for military servicemen and women serving around the world, as well as for our first responders. Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. Tonight we are going to have a couple discussions, but also just move in some regular business, updating contracts and things of that nature, and that's typically what we do here. So we'll start with approval of the minutes, resolution number 82.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Tom, seconded by Councilman Hinman. Any discussion on this? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, we'll move to privilege of the floor. Is there anyone here that wishes to address the board at this time? Seeing none, I will close privilege of the floor. The board will note correspondence that are part of the agenda, and we'll move to reports from town officers. I'd like to invite Ogden Police Chief Gray to give us his report, fourth quarter update. Got you pretty quick, Chief. I didn't get you a second to breathe yet.
Quick to go at the end, so thank you.
No, come on up.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you. Happy New Year. I haven't said Happy New Year yet. So this time I came a little bit more prepared since I'm learning how this should be presented. So I typed up a little bit of a report here to just kind of go over some of the activities and the accomplishments within the police department since I was here in November. My plan is to come quarterly and just give a brief update as to some of the things that are going on. And that's highlighted on the first page, starting on the first page, as you'll see. So since I was here last time, we've hired Officer Lawrence to fill the full-time vacancy that Sergeant Richards' promotion created. Mark is almost done with his field training. He's doing well, and he's already proving that he's going to be an asset to the agency with some of the ideas he's brought to the table. He's doing well in his field training. Subsequent to that, we hired Officer Lindauer to fill the part-time DARE position that Officer Gomez created when he left us, and just in the nick of time, we got him into the DARE school in Montour Falls. That started Monday, and it's a 2-week course there where he stays at the State Fire Training Center, and from what I hear, everything's going well. So that was great, just to get him secured in the school this semester. Otherwise, we would have gone a whole year without teaching DARE in the school, and to me, that was a priority to get somebody in there to make up for lost time. Moving on, the goals and objectives for 2023 were finalized. That's an accreditation standard that we have to develop goals and objectives for the coming year. I don't have those with me here, but basically they all focus on 4 different topics, and this coming year they're going to be officer wellness and professional development, traffic safety, community engagement, and I call it reorganizing the police department, but it's the facility, just housekeeping, cleaning, reorganizing. And some of that started prior to the new year, but that's moving along well. The patrol officers, their shift assignments change every year depending on their seniority and the bidding process, so there's been a little bit of movement. If you're around during the daytime, you may see an unfamiliar face or two, but that happens every year, so that's the officers are on their new shifts. We were able, at the 11th hour, to sign an intent to purchase with Genesee Valley Ford for a new Ford Explorer. That was hard to have happen. And in the arena of fleet maintenance, we transitioned to the highway department, working on all of our cars now, and that's been working great. From the downtime of each vehicle to the dollar savings, I think it's going to work out well for us. So that's new. And then some of the things that are coming up on the horizon here, we have one of the clerks, Tracy Mahoney, is working on finalizing the annual report, which I can probably have to the board here by the end of the week. It just takes time. Reports trickle in January, crimes that happen in December, so there's a little bit of a delay with that. Next week, all the law enforcement agencies in Monroe County are switching to a new arrest processing software that replaces a decades-old system. Councilman Gerbino is probably familiar with the system that they're finally replacing, just getting the county and the city to agree on everything is difficult, and we're just along for the ride, unfortunately. So, speaking of Gates PD, they are transitioning to 9mm pistol guns and ammunition, and what that means for us is they have a lot of extra surplus ammo that we're gonna buy. For those that don't know, I think I spoke about it last time I was here, I was having a very difficult time sourcing .45 ammo because of the shortages nationwide. Chief Long graciously offered to sell us all of their surplus, so that will get us through the next several years of qualifying, which is great news for us. And with some of the seized asset money that we have from Investigator Tigert's time on one of the task forces, we were able to spend some of that money to get new updated rifle threat ballistic vests for our officers. We had to spend that money or we were gonna lose it, so we decided to use it for situations that can be related to drug enforcement, such as executing search warrants, things of that nature. So those will be coming this spring. The officers will be going to their annual in-service training that we do every winter, and that's just kind of a legal update, current trends sort of training that everybody goes to. One of our new special police officers finishes their Peace Academy on the 4th, that's Officer Soper. I will be participating with the town supervisor in the polar plunge. Feel free to donate on my page. And,
It's an Ogden team page, Chief.
it all goes to the team, you're correct. And Officer Lindauer, once he gets finished with school, he's gonna be starting in the school district February 27th after their winter break. That's our tentative go-live date for him. And lastly, Boris Hughes has reached out that would like to have some more interns come through our department. We've done it in the past. It's always worked out great. That's basically all I have. I do have two follow-ups to questions that were posed last time I was here. Last time I spoke, there was a good question that was posed about what is a day-to-day apples to apples comparison with us in the sheriff's office. And it's very hard to break that down, but I had the clerks work on this a little bit for me. So on the last page of this packet, you'll see a few line graphs. And what these are is they represent the total number of case reports, so any police report other than a car crash that the Ogden Police Department has written versus Sheriff's Office Zone C. There's a map of C Zone here, there's a map of the county, and in the green you can see C Zone, so that shows you all the towns that they actually take calls for service in, except for us, Gates and Grease. And the way it boils down is, on any given day, in 24 hours, we have 6 officers working. They have 24. They have 8 per shift. We typically have 2, sometimes we have 1. And so those numbers are used to, for the data in these graphs. So if you look at the top graph, the total number of case reports written, in blue is the Sheriff's Office at C Zone, and you'll note that in the beginning until about the middle of the year, our officers were on par or above the amount of reports that they're writing. Which, when you just look at the graph alone, it's like, okay, but when you keep in mind that a third of the people are doing that much work, it kind of raises an eyebrow. And then, that segues down into the graph below, where it talks about the amount of cases written per officer. So if you look at the orange again, that's the amount of reports an officer is writing versus what deputy at C Zone is writing. And then lastly there, I was asked how frequently we're working alone. We use the schedule at the end of the year to actually go back and look to try and get a better number, because to be honest, I didn't know the number. I think my guess was a third when I was here. This year it ended up being officers were working alone 21% of the time. So I just wanted to come back with some more data rather than just guesstimating the last time I was here. And that's all I have, unless you gentlemen have questions.
Thank you.
Cognizant of time.
Just a quick question around
Sure.
this comparison you're talking about. This is Ogden and Ogden only against the entire C, right?
Correct.
Right.
So one agency with one town versus one agency with, I believe it's 8.
Yeah.
You know, so in all of C Zone, like we use, January of last year, we wrote at 70, 75 reports in that month, and they wrote the same amount with less people here.
Right.
So it just kind of lays it out better so it's easier to see. It's hard to compare the agencies, especially the data between the agencies. It's very difficult to do. This is kind of the best we could come up with, but that's basically all I have, unless you guys have any questions.
One more question.
Sure.
You mentioned early on that some reports were still trickling in.
Yeah.
What is the typical time frame for filling out a report or having to do that? And
A lot of it depends on the victim or the complainant for
Yeah.
the report.
Follow-ups and all that kind of
If
stuff,
they're out of town
yeah.
for the holidays and they come back, it could be the next day that they're here. Do you mean like follow-up for us?
Well, I mean, so when it actually becomes an incident for your graph, for instance, or whatever that ticker is, you know,
Is this graph new?
Yeah, of course,
But for
but-
us, it's considered a data point or a statistic the second that we write the report.
Yeah.
You know, we don't wait. What I meant by waiting for them to trickle in is if.
but then there's a case closed at some point, right?
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal,
Yeah.
you know, is that we get closures out of all these. And there's actually, I don't have those here, we actually keep track of the closure rates for the different crimes
Yeah.
based on each shift, so, yeah,
Yeah.
that answers it.
Thanks.
Chief, the Genesee Valley Ford car purchase, was that a state bid item? That's the only question I have. Thank you.
You know it's a state bid item.
Well, I had to ask. Highway superintendent mentioned that, you know, a lot of the dealers don't have
Right.
vehicles, even if it's a state bid vehicle, they just don't have it.
And the way that came to be is, Ford basically said that they were stopping production
Right.
mid-2022. And you had several agencies that had placed actual orders, that when they heard this news, they canceled their orders, that left an inventory, that they reached out to us and said, we have a vehicle that matches exactly what you have that we're trying to replace, but we don't have a VIN number, it hasn't been built yet. It's
Okay.
it's scheduled to be built.
Right.
And if you want it, it's yours.
Okay.
So that's what we agreed to.
Great.
So, because it was hard to plan. We had considered looking at other vehicles, makes and models, and in the interest of keeping
Kia?
everything the same.
You want to get it?
Not Kia or Hyundai.
Coincidental. Yeah, so when the chief came running in December 27th and said, hey, we got a car, how can we make this happen? We just did.
Great.
Very good. Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Some of this stuff I'm gonna skip, but I'll talk about one thing since the chief is still here. This past week, or maybe it was last week at this point, the police chief and the fire marshal, along with the security director, former police chief Chris Mears, did a radio test in the school district in all the basements, just to make sure in an emergency, their communication system works. And just another great collaborative effort with the school district, and they did well, is the conclusion of that. But it was another great collaboration that we have to just help in safety and security with the school district. I did go to the grand opening of the Golisano Communities Engagement Center yesterday. I don't know when that was. It was this week. What a tremendous building. I was really glad that our building inspector could be there, who has done a lot of work to make sure that they were able to open in an effective time. I would invite all of you to visit it. It really is tremendous. Wasn't sure when or if the highway superintendent was going to be here, but I attended an event with Superintendent Wolf and a bunch of the highway guys. There was a really nice event that the county put on at their fleet center, just to honor all the agencies that went out and helped out in Erie County. And it was a really nice, time just to celebrate, individuals that don't often receive awards or recognition. And I thought that it was just, obviously, great collaboration that our highway department has with the county, but also just really kind that they would take the time to recognize our people. So that was great. We did meet with, in the last week, 3 different consultants for our comprehensive plan. Great conversations with them. I will tell you that unfortunately we did not receive the grant. We're not exactly sure why, but we do have a call set up with the state for them to walk us through why we did not receive the grant. what I said when we applied is that we're moving forward anyways, but the people that we've talked to, I mean, there's really, really great ideas, and I think one of the things that I've learned is that the 2012 comp plan was really a minor update from the 2002 comp plan. And I think that it's well worth an investment to update several parts of that, and there'll be more information on that very soon. We have been in lots of conversation with Mr. Shum and our finance director, Brian Grant, just to update our procurement policy. We are very close to having a policy set, but we also want to have a procedure to go with it. And so I'm waiting to bring that to the board for review. I also want to give you the old policy so that we have time, and we'll workshop it before we actually put it before you, and then we have to, pass that. So I want to make sure that we're spending time. I also want to make sure that all of the department heads have time to weigh in as well. So we're trying to plan for them to take a look at it before it comes here, so it's like 5% of the way there with your input. And I'll explain part of the issues with the current policy as well at that time. I also want to give a tremendous amount of credit to the police department and specifically the fire department. Within the last week and a half, they literally saved a man's life at Calvary Chapel using the Lucas machine, and the individual by all means was dead, and they were able to revive him. And just tremendous efforts, and a lot of credit for the hard work, but also the diligence in getting this machine that, to my recollection and my knowledge, has saved at least 2 individuals at this point. It's huge, tremendous. Polar plunge is done. I also want to mention this. We've been preparing and planning and have been absolutely a nuisance to the county on this, but all for good fruit, and that is that right now it is planned that we will have our very first mobile DMV back here in Ogden on Wednesday, February 15th.
About time.
There are still some things. I went back and forth with their IMA. I told them from the beginning I didn't love it, and they said that they changed it. They kind of didn't. So I asked for a couple other changes, and then a third time, and finally the county attorney said, well, we sent it to you in a Word document. You go ahead and make the changes you want. I said, okay. So I did, and made sure that the police chief saw it, because it still asked for an officer, and of course the town attorney. So we're very, very close. They're going to do a pretty good campaign for this. We're going to try to do a slow rollout, test the equipment, things like that. So really, really excited. They have a vested interest in this working, because it's the first mobile since 2020 or 2019 even. So so excited for that. Okay, I'm done. Let's see, Councilman Baker.
Well, thank you. So just a couple items. First, it was a pleasure joining the supervisor, the town clerk, and members of the board at the induction ceremony for joining the Spencerport Rotary. And I know Councilman Toms is going to talk a little bit more about that, but it was just, it's nice to be engaged, apart from what we do here in government, just being part of a service organization. It's one of the long-standing mottos of the Rotary is service above self. So, we all perform a service when we sit up here, but also participating with that organization, I think, is going to be very fruitful for all of us in the end. So I was very happy to be there for that. Just 2 items, literally on a government side of things. I sat in on a meeting representing my state senator recently at the Veterans Council that was held down in Rochester. Got some great information. There was elected officials from the state. Congressman Morelli was there, along with Senator Ort, Senator Helming, some other electeds. But just the conversation that we were having with veterans, I know it was mentioned in our earlier workshop before this meeting, talking about the veterans exemptions. You know, there's still a lot of municipalities that aren't participating in that for, you know, certain reasons, but one of the things that we heard from the veterans out there was, you know, looking at ways that, you know, they can be helped out, you know, with their taxes and things. Laura Stradley, who runs the Veterans Outreach Center, talked quite a bit about the services that VOC provides. So it was good to hear that. The other thing, just over the weekend on Saturday, I sat in and participated in a meeting with the, it's called FASNY, it's the Firemen's Association of the State of New York. They've got different regions around the state. I was at the North Central meeting held in Canandaigua, but the message is gonna be the same. They have a advocate there who speaks on their behalf in Albany with matters of legislation, so their legislative director talked about some bills, things that are going up in front of the state legislature, but what's germane to what we're doing here at the town level is there is talk of a fireman, volunteer firefighter, what do we want to call it? I don't want to call it a stipend, but there is some bills that may be pushing forward that have a reimbursement or some sort of paid component attached to this. The question is gonna be, and it always is, who's gonna pay for this? So there's no question that, you know, what volunteer firefighters contribute to their communities, you know, is you know, absolutely invaluable. But now, you know, if we're gonna start paying volunteers to respond to calls, or how that whole mechanism works, it just comes down to the costs. So that was one of the things we had heard and were talking about. The other thing too was just some local things that are going on, and how the governor in her State of the State address, how she's going to, that was one of the things that brought this whole conversation on, was her State of the State address. There is a book attached to it, and you can go on the state's website, on her website, and read it, but there is an entire section there for volunteer firefighters, and one of those, that item was discussed. Again, it's kind of higher level, not really any detail, but this is what I want to do. So just to kind of, for all of us here at the local level, just kind of keep in mind, you know, so, but that's it.
Thank you, Aaron. Councilman Gerbino.
Relative to parks, recreation, and the senior center, a couple of things that we're working on, meetings to take place in the future. So rather than speak to those in advance of them taking place, I'll say that those things, as we move forward on some of them, I'll report to you after we see what results we get and what in fact we've discussed. I'd like to step off for a second, even though the chief was already at the podium, relative to a couple of things to do with you and the police department. I'd just like to commend you on your very proactive movement on some of the things in your report, not just relative to producing for us what we need to see relative to how the police department works, but also in making some changes that changes don't always come easily, and in fact, some of those changes, as you said, have already served to benefit you. A side note of that, the one stat that I would just caution everyone on the board to be aware of, that even though it's only 21% of the time that an officer in Ogden has been on the job alone, the reality in police work is 0% of the time is that acceptable. Now, in a perfect world, multiple numbers. In a world where it reflects on budgets and ability to, you know, pay for salaries and benefits and all, you know, we do have to address those things accordingly, and we can't just throw bodies into it. But by my standards, I'm glad it's 21% and not 33 or 40%. But I will say, 21% of the time, an officer's at a much greater risk of being out there alone. And on one other thing that is actually on your report, both the supervisor and you spoke to, the polar plunge, I'd like to spell one thing out relative to that. There's always a lot of chuckling and bantering over the fact that people are gonna be jumping into Lake Ontario in the coldest month of the year to raise money for Special Olympics. The piece that a lot of people don't get, because all by itself, that speaks to craziness and, yeah, fundraising for a non-for-profit, and oh my goodness, the reality is, the money raised for that, and quite honestly, the support that's come from Ogden in the last 3 years and seems to be getting progressively more, and not from a budgetary perspective, but from an involvement. Law Enforcement Torch Run runs the polar bear plunge. So as Ogden is becoming the base station for the torch run itself, the mechanics by which the officers run the torch and then run the polar plunge benefits those with intellectual disabilities. And here's where it affects the town indirectly and all municipalities. The amount of money raised goes directly to supporting those in Special Olympics. What people don't realize is Special Olympics isn't just about athletics, it's about life systems for those with intellectual disabilities. Those life systems, as they're being addressed in Special Olympics, competition, training, coordination, it then translates to jobs and health systems. And within Special Olympics, what you don't see or hear, those things are all addressed at the events. And ultimately, the payback to any municipality is fewer people with disabilities are in need of police service, medical assistance, housing assistance. They're truly mainlined ultimately, more numbers than you can believe, living on their own, driving their own cars. The perception that intellectual disabilities in Special Olympics is people that are so disabled that they can't function is an absolute misinterpretation of the people that participate. So overall for the town, the benefit will extend far beyond our time sitting here on this board. So again, Chief, thank you, and to the town for supporting that particular, those events. It's a worthy cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. It's a little bit more eloquent than when you just told me to jump in a lake.
Excuse me, I said go jump in.
Go jump in a lake, that's right. That was great, thank you. Councilman Hinman.
Yeah, I was able to spend some time with the planning board last week. It was really good. I got to attend their meeting. Wasn't much going on there, but I also went afterwards, went out for a bite to eat, just to kind of get to meet everybody and listen to them and what concerns they might have. And was pleased to find out that they've never had that type of a relationship with this board, and first they were kind of like, they were questioning like, why are you here, what's going on? They were nervous that I was out there, and I was like, but so I went out with them afterwards. I guess they do it after every meeting. They go out to get a bite to eat and a drink or something. So I went with them and just to meet with them and talk and just see what's going on, and I was very pleased with the reception after the evening. Just they really felt like it was a good thing. Like wow, we're getting some support from the board, and I think that's it's only gonna lead to good things. So I think overall it was a good time. It was good. It was a good meeting, and I think we're making steps moving forward to support that and support the other boards. So.
And just to piggyback on that, I know Councilman Hinman, but along with the building department, we're going to be proposing some code changes coming up. And the building department spend a lot of time, I know Josh has as well, just kind of going through some of the codes that are a bit outdated. I know this board has entertained several since last year, and there's going to be a list of a couple more for us to entertain as well. And there's a process to that, clearly, but what we're going to do first is we're actually going to have workshops with the planning board and the zoning board to get their feedback, which again has never really happened. I mean, these are the people that are having to deal with the result of the code. And I've said this before. I don't know that every code change is the right one, but that's why we're a board of 5, and we we all have a say in how we want the town to look and feel and develop, so. Thank you, Josh. Councilman Toms?
Yes, thank you. As Councilman Baker mentioned, I was also at the Rotary induction last Monday, and they were asking for volunteers for a trivia night that they were having on the following evening at Pinewood Country Club. It was very well attended. They had 25 teams. One had to actually sit at the bar. There was not enough tables for them all to sit at. So I understand this was their first trivia night that they were doing, so went pretty well. It lasted quite a long time. It started at 6 and it went all the way till 9 o'clock before they got through all of the questions. But it was a good fundraiser for the Dream Factory. Part of the proceeds went there. They had a good time. Thanks.
And they definitely put Councilman Toms to work.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and as was said earlier, I'm really grateful that we're, proactive with this board in not just what we're doing here, but in very, worthy organizations such as the Rotary.
Yeah.
So I know that they appreciate it. Let's see, our town clerk, Noel Burley.
We are busy collecting, town and county taxes, and, passports are really picking up, so I think people are trying to get out of town.
Thank you, Mr. Shum.
Just want to commend the building department on finalizing the permit for the fire district. It was a collaborative effort to make sure that conditions were reasonable and at the same time not too restrictive. Had a preliminary discussion with the chief concerning procedures for internal matters, and I'll just leave it at that. It's an ongoing discussion. I want to commend the personnel department for kicking off the required training. I think everyone should have received a download for that, and I'm pleased to say on my wall I've passed the harassment, got my
Same.
certificate, and in fact I invited everyone in my office to come in and sit through that hour, and it was it served two purposes. Number one, it killed an hour for everybody, but number two, it allowed me to make sure that my employees participated in what really is required information for all employees.
We'll bill you for that.
Huh?
We'll bill you for it.
That's it.
Who
One of the things
took
that
the
was in
test?
the governor's State of the State address was, again, about issue of volunteer services, but it related to ambulance services. And the problem with the very rural nature of ambulance services in the Adirondacks and some of the more rural areas. And we ran into this when we formed the ambulance district and were hit head-on with the state audit and control telling us that the fire district budget is not part of the 2% cap, but ambulance district budgets are part of the 2% cap. And the answer from audit and control is they need to change the law. And that would be a very simple change in the law to allow for the municipalities to help volunteer ambulance services continue to at least exist in their community without jeopardizing budgets in other areas that may suffer because the ambulance budget is part of the 2% cap. And I too attended. I was a stand-in at the planning board at this last meeting, and I do, even though there was only one matter, and it was the fire district, I do have to say that the board and the personnel that were there, our town engineer, our highway superintendent, the chairman, and all the members, gave due regard to the application, asked pertinent questions, and were involved in the process. So it was a good experience for me. I've never met any of the members of the board until that evening. I thought they did a wonderful job. That's it.
Very good. All right, let's move into new business then. Madam Clerk?
Resolution 83, authorizing the acting town supervisor Mike Zale to sign an intermunicipal agreement with the Village of Spencerport.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Tom, seconded by Councilman Gerbino. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 84, authorizing Ogden Town Supervisor Mike Sale to execute an agreement with Rosie's Housekeeping LLC for the provision of cleaning services at the Ogden Community Center, Ogden Police Station, and the Little Red Building.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hinman, seconded by Councilman Baker. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 85, grant a special use permit for the construction of a fire training facility at 2588 Union Street and setting conditions and restrictions for the same.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Baker, seconded by Councilman Gerbino. Any discussion on this? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Resolution 86, authorizing the Town of Ogden Highway Department to sell items no longer needed for public purpose.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Baker, seconded by Councilman Gerbino. Any discussion on this?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 87, authorizing Ogden Town Supervisor Mike Sale to execute an extension to an agreement between the Town of Ogden Highway Department and Mike's Commercial Cleaning League for the provision of cleaning services at the Ogden Highway facility.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Baker, seconded by Councilman Hinman. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 88, authorizing Ogden Town Supervisor Mike Sale to execute the 2023 contract with Johnson Controls for fire alarm and fire extinguisher inspections at the Ogden Highway facility.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Baker, seconded by Councilman Hinman. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 89, authorizing Ogden Town Supervisor Mike Sale to execute the 2023 contract with Johnson Controls for firearms and fire extinguisher inspections at the Ogden Community Center.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Gerbino, seconded by Councilman Toms. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 90, authorizing Ogden Town Supervisor Mike Sale to execute an agreement with Johnson Controls for the provision of a backflow prevention test at Byway Ponds Park.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Gerbino, seconded by Councilman Hinman. Any discussion on this? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 91, authorizing the Town of Ogden Parks and Recreation Department to dispose of items no longer needed for public purpose.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Gerbino, seconded by Councilman Baker. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 92, authorizing Ogden Town Supervisor Mike Sale to execute an intermunicipal agreement with the County of Monroe for the receipt and the use of state funding for the 2023 STOP BWI program.
I'll move that.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hinman, seconded by Councilman Gerbino. Any discussion on this? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next, please.
Resolution 93, amending the 2023 schedule of the Town of Ogden to exempt the collection of fees for annual fire marshal safety inspections for operating permits conducted for the Village of Spensport, the Spensport Fire District, and the Gates Ambulance Services, Inc.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Tom, seconded by Councilman Baker. Any discussion on this? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Anything before we adjourn?
Nope.
Can I get a motion for adjournment, please?
Better move quick.
Motion by Councilman Baker.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Hinman. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all for attending.